Well, good morning, everyone, and I'm glad to see already a lot of comments in the panel. You know, we have people from Oman, from, of course, the UAE. We have people from India. I've seen Jordan, Lebanon. So welcome, everyone. Please keep sharing. So here we're going to talk about optimized power system performance in the Middle East today, and I have four leading experts from WÄRTSILÄ who are going to be giving us a presentation about this topic, and I'd like to ask them to introduce themselves. So each in turn, please, if you could unmute your microphone and introduce yourself shortly. Alexander, can you go first?
Yes, good afternoon, Alexander Kaman. So I'm the Energy Business Director in the Middle East. I'm based in the paradise of Dubai. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you very much, Alexander. And next, I'd like to ask Matti, please, could you introduce yourself?
Of course. Good afternoon also from my side. Matti Rautkivi, based in Helsinki. I'm heading our WÄRTSILÄ energy businesses strategy and business development. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Matti. I think I'll stick to your name because your surname is going to be a bit complicated for me to pronounce. So we have people in Dubai, we have people in Finland. Giriraj, I'd like to also ask you to introduce yourself. So if you can take your microphone off, please.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Giriraj Rathore, and I'm based in WÄRTSILÄ, Dubai, WÄRTSILÄ Middle East. I handle the energy storage and optimization portfolio at WÄRTSILÄ Middle East. Good to be here.
Thank you very much, Giriraj. And last, but most certainly not least, Patrick, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrick Farkas. I'm a market development manager for WÄRTSILÄ Middle East. I'm based in Dubai, but now I'm signing in from the Netherlands. So hello, everyone.
Thank you. As you can see, a very truly international panel here today, partly because, you know, what's going on with COVID. Some people are stuck in their home countries at times or elsewhere where they work. But I'm glad to see as well that there are many people here also from Saudi. I've seen people from Spain, many people from India, Germany, Nigeria, anyway, Pakistan. Welcome, everyone. So I'd like to ask Manuel if you can stop sharing that slide, please. And I would ask Alex to share your screen so that we can get ready essentially, and also take your mute off. And whilst Alexander prepares the screen, I'd just like to let you know how the structure is going to go today. And it's very, very easy. We're going to have a presentation from these four speakers, and then we're going to take questions from the audience. I'd like to ask you, please, to send your questions through the Q&A box, which is a little box that is at the bottom of your toolbar. Just use that, because if you send them through the chat, they get lost in the chatter, and that way we can actually go through them more systematically. So Alexander, can I ask you to put that on a large screen, please? If you...
Yes.
No, actually it was before, but now I can see like 3 different screens. So...
Hey, hold on. Maybe better that way.
Let me see. Yes, perfect. That's perfect. Yes, go ahead then.
Oh, thank you very much. So distinguished guests, partner, friends, well, ladies and gentlemen, so I think it's my pleasure to welcome you to WÄRTSILÄ Middle East webinar. I mean, as we speak, I think we all agree that the Middle East is gradually opening up from the COVID-19 pandemic and focusing obviously intensively on the economic recovery. But I think today what we want to see is, let's be aware of any possible false step in this restart, and definitely around the energy development. And I think that's what we want to bring today with the panel that I have with me. So what WÄRTSILÄ energy business today? Well, we help our customer in solving the value of the energy transitions, you know, by optimizing their energy system, right? So our offering today has been internal combustion engine based. So basically build large power plants. And today we have around 72 gigawatt of capacity installed around the world. At the same time, we develop and dispatch a lot of energy storage and management system. And I think today we also have 70 installations globally. But nevertheless, all of that is also a huge lifecycle support team that is basically supporting this entire capacity. So we have in our globalities of WÄRTSILÄ energy business, 5,500 people. I think we are probably locating in about 70 countries and probably have more than 180 locations. So as all in all, that's what WÄRTSILÄ energy business is all about. So looking briefly at where we are, so Middle East and Asia is the largest installed base that we have with close to 39 gigawatt, and followed by the Americas, Europe and Africa. But I think what I would like to do is bring you to the attention that our core business is not just supporting utilities or developing with IPPs or industrial. I think we have a very nice mix of probably 60% of activities has been actually around utilities, and some of the IPPs have been supporting that. And then the industrial market, where maybe in this region we've been maybe more known, is only actually a 30% fraction of all our activities, including the oil and gas. But let's have a short snapshot on actually what our DNA is. On the left side, we can see one of our big babies. We call them babies here. They're actually gigantic engines. And on the right side is basically the largest IPP that we have actually developed, and also the largest IPP today installed and in operation, which is this 573 megawatts in Jordan. I think what I would like just to picture you is that even though as big as it looks, engine provide today with energy storage, probably the best answer to fast start stop and on-go configurations. As big as they look, they're still the fastest. So the plant, as you see in Jordan, in capability is right. In 5 minutes, this power could be online. But looking at the whole broader development that our DNA brought us is obviously linked to the gas development. Our legacy around gas technology, we have been one of the first pioneers to introduce the gas into the industry, either in the marine, either in the energy sector. And we believe, again, that this legacy is going to move forwards as soon as we enter into the synthetic gas future. Looking at the energy storage, we made short acquisitions in 2017, and energy storage is becoming, for us, increasingly critical to help the strengthening the reliability and flexibility of the grid. I think today deploying advanced energy storage system we're developing for grid scale to behind the meter and microgrid solutions. But again, I'm not going to go too much in detail there. I think DRIVERS will carry a much more detailed overview of the capabilities that we have. Now, looking at where we are in the Middle East. So today we have a little bit slightly over 7 gigawatt of installed power with about 300 installations. Our headquarters is in Dubai, where the center of universe, I say, of a lot of our experts and the digital expertise is basically based in Dubai. But in theory, we have actually positions and branch pretty much in the entire Middle East. So Pakistan with Lahore, over 400 engineers to support the 2.1 giga that we have installed. Jeddah, we have also about 250 local guys to support our 1.3 gigawatt. And then obviously, we have positions in Iraq, Yemen, Oman, of course, Qatar, Jordan. So we are spread pretty well. We always love to be as much as possible close to our customer. But then, if I look briefly, just looking at the energy scenarios, Middle East countries are gradually transforming their fossil-based power generation fleet into sustainable and diversified energy supply. And I think we have seen it very clearly in the recent increase of solar activities. At the same time, so question for us today is that will this be enough for this to reach the most affordable, the most sustainable energy? And yet, how we navigate the path to this future is something probably less unclear. And again, I think during the seminar, during the webinar, we're going to try to walk you through that idea. So we want to help you to understand better how the energy transition will unfold, with renewable becoming basically the base load. We believe that we can help in designing and building the transitions with the proper planning, and we are ready to provide design, and we're ready to provide you with the best service that we can. But I think with these few words, I would be pleased to welcome Matti to walk us through the energy transitions. I hope that you will gain new perspective during the rest of the webinar. And again, thank you for your attention. And I think without any delay, Matti, let's rock and roll.
Thanks, Alex. Alex, and let's see if I manage to do this. And hopefully you can see my screen right now. I'm as mentioned, I'm looking after the WÄRTSILÄ's energy business and the global level from the strategic point of view, and try to understand that as a technology company like WÄRTSILÄ is that how does the world look like in 10-15 years? What is the situation right now and where we are heading? And as a technology company, you need to try to understand the future and what is creating value in the future systems. And of course, we are focusing on the energy system so that we have enough time and we have understanding that what type of services, what type of offering is there that the customers are receiving the value then. But let's look at how does the energy transition look like right now, and what is the kind of situation right now. And of course, the one thing that has been driving the global energy trends is the really rapid change in the renewable prices, and lately in the energy storage. But if we look at the solar PV prices since 2010, so in a 10 years time, around 85% reduction in the costs, while at the same time for the wind, around half, so 50% reduction in the cost levels. So there's the cost of renewable energy per se has decreased, and we have witnessed this by our own eyes. I have been buying wind PPAs in the United States less than $20 per megawatt hour. Now in the European Union, in Finland, those are less than 30 euros per megawatt hour. Solar PV we see less than $20 per megawatt hour. So really competitive pricing for the renewable energy. And then the energy storage that has come a little bit later to the picture, but this is also now seeing significant price reduction since 2010, so 85% reduction in the costs. And where this is heading is that if we look already now, so and how fast, I like to talk about that. Everybody talks about the energy transition, Energiewende in Germany, and we know that this is going on, but how rapid and fundamental change has been. And if we look the world in 2014, so just in 6 years ago, there were only 3 places on Earth where renewable energy was the cheapest option if you build some new source of bulk energy. Those were Germany, Denmark, and Uruguay. Now in 2019, 2/3 of the world renewable energy is the cheapest new option for energy. So extremely rapid change in 5 years from basically nothing to 2/3 of the world. And what Bloomberg New Energy Finance predicts by 2030, this will be the case globally everywhere, that where renewable energy is the cheapest option. So really fundamental and interesting change, and this is, I think, the most important thing for everybody to have a debate and understanding that this is not driven by the politics anymore. Why renewables are put into the system, but it's because of the economics. And when the economics start to play the game, things start to happen way faster. And this transition we have witnessed already in the countries like United States, Australia, Europe, and of course now also in the Middle East, heavily coming to the game when we see so cheap solar PV coming to the market. But moving forward, if we look a little bit closer at what does it mean from the install capacity perspective, and how fast this will change the landscape by 2040. So if we have now what calls new technologies, so renewables and flexibility represent around 17% of the overall capacity mix in 2019. By 2040, so in 20 years time, this will represent 57% of the capacity. So a massive shift towards the renewables and flexibility. And at the same time, good to notice that while the overall capacity totally in the world was around 7 terawatts, so 7,000 gigawatts of capacity in 2018, by 2040 it's by 15.5 terawatts. So we, of course, because of the nature of the renewable energy, we will need more capacity, and there is a lot of investments required. So in that sense, one of the key things here to ensure that renewable energy available, that we are able to finance this and get these investments moving. Looking this a little bit closer, this is what gets the eye every time, is that how much wind, which is light blue here, will be installed, or solar, how much that it will put there. But the focus where we are focusing, and what Alex mentioned also there, that what is our portfolio today, is that we talk about flexibility, that how you integrate these renewables, affordable renewables, in the power system in the future. And here we see that exactly the same kind of development. So actually, if you looked at from the capacity perspective, that flexibility, flexible gas and energy storage are the fastest growing markets in the next 20 years, that where we're going to see investments. And looking on the left-hand side here, you can see the light gray there, which is the baseload gas, traditional combined cycle gas, that is actually declining over time, and that's driven by, once again, the renewables, that the operational profile of these combined cycle will change. We have less running hours, more starts, and the systems and the system modeling starts to favor heavily more intermittent or intermediate and peaking type of application, which is the orange bar here. So the market for the gas engines and flexible engines will grow according to Bloomberg analysis, that from the kind of around 5 gigawatt market that has been the bigger market to up to 40 gigawatts by 2040. So massive change there, as well in the energy storage, which is also heavily and fastest growing market. So if we look at the energy trends, and it's obvious now that when people start to understand that how fundamentally renewable energy is changing the landscape, there is no room for baseload anymore. We need more peaking capacity, and when you go to beyond certain threshold, depending on the energy system, energy storage start to play a key role there in a massive scale. I would say that in every power system there's a value already today for energy storage, but when we start to talk about massive scale energy storage installation, then we are talking about a lot of cheap renewable energy and excess renewable energy available. But by 2040, so at the same time period, in 20 years roughly, we're going to see 122-fold growth in the energy storage. So even though it's a hot topic now, and we talk about a lot about those, we celebrate the newest deals and the biggest deals. This is just the beginning in that sense, that how the growth is coming. And one thing here, that if you saw that thought that 85% reduction since 2010 for the energy storage installation, by 2019, this will actually just continue, and the price levels what we're gonna expect for the energy storage will decline in the future. And of course, this is a dilemma in the many power systems, when to invest. And I recommend that when, as I say, that in every power system we can find value for energy storage already today, and the role and the need for that energy storage and flexibility in general will increase when we move forward. So a lot of renewables, a lot of flexibility coming to the power systems. And now, even though we are in the middle of the crisis during the COVID-19 situation globally, and this is definitely a new situation for the whole world, but it's something interesting actually that has happened also during this, from the energy transition and energy system perspective. And this spring, what we have found out is that we develop a tool. You can Google that, and here's the source, WÄRTSILÄ Energy Transition Lab. It's a really cool tool that gathers all the information of the European electricity system. We can put any power system basically there, but the information from the European Union is easily available. And we can look at what has been the impact of how the system is operating, what is the price levels, what is generating, what are the transmission flows, and how the systems are performing now. And now what has happened and this graph is April 2020 in Germany, is that when we have COVID-19 situation and the lockdowns, the electricity demand is down around 10%. But at the same time, renewables are still generating. So sun is shining, wind is blowing. They don't care about this virus. They are still generating as last year. So this has led to us to a situation that we have higher share of renewables than ever before in globally, I would say, but also especially in the Europe now that we see the levels in the European level of 55% renewables in the whole European level was met in May. And there are days when Germany, for example, is generating around 80% of its energy with renewable energy. So countries are seeing and experiencing massive amount of renewable energy that we were expecting to see by 2030 levels, that when we continue to do the installation. And this is why this is so crucial and important thing, is that now when we have high share of renewables in the power systems, like in Europe, we can learn from this. We can see that what are the implications, what will happen, what has happened now, where to invest, how to develop this system. And for example, one finding from the Germany is that the prices will go negative when there is excess generation. It is really, really challenging time for coal plants, for the combined cycle plants, and they are really suffering in this market. While at the same time, even though the prices are down now in the Europe, energy storage is making more money than ever, and flexible gas is making more money than ever, because the flexibility is recognized in these high renewable power systems. So really interesting findings that what we can see now, and I recommend that go and check it out and see there is a lot of webinars or webcasts also about this analysis, that what has happened to the energy storage, what has happened to the flexible gas, what will happen to the flexible base load. So super interesting analysis, and as a humankind, as an energy industry, we can really learn a lot from this situation when we crunch the data and understand this. As a summary, can say that before moving to Patrick, that we are energy transition is going on, driven by cheap renewable energy, driven by economics, and that is opening a totally new era and an increasing market for flexible gas and energy storage. And go and check it out, what has happened in the Europe this spring. And that's just a glimpse to the future and evidence that this will make sense, a lot of sense in the future power system. So thank you from my side, and I hand over to Patrick to continue the show from here.
Thanks, Matti. Please let me know if you can see my screen.
We can't yet. Whilst Patrick shares his screen, I just wanted to remind you to please send your questions through the Q&A box, and that we are recording the session, and we will send you both the recording and this presentation that so many of you are asking about in the email in a couple of days, so that you can actually go through the material again. Could you make that into a large screen, Patrick?
Yes, I'm trying my best.
Perfect. Yeah, now we can see it perfectly.
All right, perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. So Matti talked about energy trends, but why is it important? Because energy is one of the key enablers of economic growth. As a matter of fact, the export of energy products enabled a great deal the economic growth of the Middle Eastern countries over the past 40 years. And it still represents the backbone of the economy of many GCC countries. But it also creates a single-sided exposure for the governments, as their revenues are heavily dependent on oil, and the fluctuation in oil price have an immediate and severe impact on the government budgets. And it was clearly visible over the past couple of months when the OPEC plus production dispute, together with the global demand collapse driven by the corona situation, basically sent global oil prices down to a historic low sub $30 region. And as a result, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the UAE immediately had to slash its government spendings, and credit ratings of Oman and Kuwait were also downgraded almost immediately. So most of the Middle Eastern countries have long realized the need for economic diversification. And this intention is very well represented in their Vision 2030 strategies. Although making this transformation from molecule-based economic structures to higher value-add economies is a challenging task. And we believe that the Middle East is in a unique position, and cheap and sustainable power supply can be actually the new foundation of future growth. Strategically working on this initiative can create a second economic pillar, which basically can open the door for other industries such as energy-intensive heavy industries to further expand in the region. And the Gulf countries are perfectly positioned. Geographically, they are between 3 continents. Their logistic infrastructure is excellent. There is sufficient workforce, favorable investment climate. So basically everything is given. The last missing piece is the cheap and sustainable power supply. And I have to make a note here that allowing energy-intensive industries to expand in the region will also attract other industries to grow around them, which will also contribute to this goal to diversify the economy. So leadership on low-cost economy can play a crucial role for the countries to reach their Vision 2030 targets, although there are some changes in the energy mix which can also contribute this transition. So let's see what changes we see in the Middle East. The first one is what Matti described very well, that renewables are becoming the cheapest source of electricity. This is especially true for the Middle East. The region has excellent renewable potential. A solar panel in the Gulf produces twice as much energy than the same unit does in Germany. And let's not forget about the wind potential that the region holds. Saudi, certain parts of Oman, Kuwait are all blessed with very consistent and strong winds. So if you take a look at the screen, you'll see that solar PPA prices today in the Middle East are already below the price level where solar PPA prices are expected from other regions are expected to be in 10 years. So no surprise that this makes solar PV generation the cheapest source of electricity, places it first in the merit order, and also it holds a huge upside potential to further reduce the blended cost of electricity in the region. This is a global trend, but moving to the second driver, this is very specific for the Middle East, and that's basically the decoupling of power and water generation. The Middle East is the largest market for water treatment, and nearly half of the global desalination capacity is located there. But while the rest of the world applies membrane-based desalination, the Middle East is still dominated by thermal distillation, which basically requires heat. Therefore, it ties fossil fuels into water to the water generation. But now we see more and more countries committing themselves to phase out this old-fashioned thermal distillation, and it will have a very important consequence. It will lead to a structural shift. The traditional IWPP model will come to an end, and power has to be a separate, standalone, and competitive product. It will encourage competition between various power producers to generate power at the lowest cost. And also it will let a great portion of inflexible and inefficient generation to leave the market. And then the gap could be filled with renewables or other smart and more sustainable technologies. The third change driver is related to oil economics. No surprise. However, the long-term consequences of this are still a little bit uncertain. On one hand side, we see that the current depressed oil price environment already puts a great fiscal pressure on governments and government organizations, and enhances them or encourages them to increase their operational efficiency and reduce their subsidies. And we expect that this will also happen in the energy space, improving and improvements in transmission, in distribution, and in generations will be introduced. On the other hand, this low-cost oil-priced environment also somehow conserves the current situation and sustains the the low-cost fuel supply of thermal generation, making them a little bit more challenging to replace by other sources. Speaking of replacement, that takes us to our last change drivers. Robert in QA asked whether we have any speculation on how global energy demand is going to increase in the future. Well, this is hard to tell in this Corona situation, but if we take a look at the installed base in the Middle East, that we see that 1/3 of the generation is actually near retirement age. There is 43 gigawatt installed capacity that exceeded the 30-year mark. Therefore, the replacement of these assets will be quite a big task and already a big challenge. So as a result of all these changes, I think that the way we see power generation in the Middle East has to fundamentally change. The GCC countries arrive to crossroads where they need to make agile decisions which withstand a 30-year time horizon. Countries and utilities have to make the right bets on future capacity development today, which will ensure the long-term sustainable, long-term competitiveness, sustainability of their power system, as well as the resiliency of the grid. The good news that the Middle East is twice blessed. As said, there is abundance of cheap fossil fuels and excellent renewable conditions. However, it's unfortunately still not enough. 10 power plants with the lowest generation cost will not necessarily lead to the lowest system level electricity. And the reason why it won't be, because you still need one component, as Matti highlighted already, flexibility is the key word here. Dispatchable flexibility will be the enabler to really unlock this potential and will be responsible for seamlessly integrate various cheap energy sources into one well-working grid. And probably this is the hottest topic nowadays in the energy industry. The role and value of flexibility is being analyzed by all of the major energy companies and energy agencies like IRENA, the International Energy Agency, and Bloomberg. They all published their report adopting slightly different mindset. However, there is a consensus building in the industry that due to the price drop in renewables, the cost of bulk electricity is expected to decrease, although the role of balancing and ancillary services will be more important than ever. And I have to make a note here that this can only happen if there is a well-working, modern regulatory framework in place that properly values the system-level benefits that flexibility can provide for the whole grid. So for the Middle East, I believe that the biggest challenge is to have a strong and dedicated leadership that facilitates a mindset change, and that mindset change basically should be based on a true commitment to become a world-class leader in low-cost sustainable electricity in the Gulf. And this may also assist to the establishment of a second economic pillar. So Matti talked about energy trends. I talked about the energy changes in the energy sector in the Middle East. But now I would like to demonstrate quickly how the utilities can adapt to this new environment. And then together with my colleague Giriraj, we will briefly introduce some tools that can make this transmission smooth and easy. So let's imagine a future power system where the penetration of renewables already reaches 50%. I know it sounds a little bit futuristic for the Middle East as of today, but this is very much represents the situation in several European countries today. And also, I think, well shows the direction where the GCC is heading to. So let's take an example week. We have solar generation, we have some wind generation. We see the combined production of these weather-dependent renewables. And obviously, they all contribute to cover some part of the load. So the load is shown with the black curve. In the past, 10 years ago in the Middle East, that load was only satisfied with the generation of thermal, traditional fossil fuel power plants. But as more renewables are feeding into the system, the thermal assets, the traditional fossil fuel generators, role is changing a little bit, and they are being dispatched against the net load, which we get if we deduct the production of renewables from the total load. And the point of this picture is just to illustrate the key changes that utilities are facing. So first of all, that the traditional baseload as a notion is disappearing. This was a very big chunk and a predictable piece of power supply, but with the advent of renewables, this will be gone. Fossil fuel power plants, the traditional baseload or dispatchable power plants will see much more ramp ups and ramp downs. Their gradient will increase and their magnitude of the ramping requirement will increase. They will register much more part load operation or low load operation, more frequent load changes, and on low demand and good renewable conditions day, the thermal generation needs to be completely shut down, and then it has to come back immediately once the demand picks up or the sun goes down. So why is it important? Why do we talk about that? Well, the main reason is that traditional baseload large-scale power plants, especially power plants with the steam cycles, are not designed for this kind of operation. And it's very important to know that those assets are highly efficient units when they run at full load, flat out. But once they have to more load following and more cycling and operation like this, their production cost starts to shoot up to the air, starts to increase. Furthermore, this can also lead to system reliability issues. These large baseload power plants have a quite limited operational threshold, which can lead to either unnecessary curtailment of renewables, or even worse, to some grid reliability issues. So, all in all, this graph illustrates the requirements that the requirements are changing for dispatchable power plants, and a bigger portion of the traditional fleet has to handle the load volatility or this variable load without having significant cost consequences. So a modern utility will have much more diversified portfolio than most of the utilities have today, but then the share of flexibility in these portfolios will be much higher than it is today. We think that this trend will be also reflected in the capacity selection criteria of resource planners. Therefore, flexible power plant properties such as ramping gradient, starting cost, minimum up and downtime are becoming increasingly important and becoming important factors. So seeing all the solar projects being announced in the Middle East, we see a big room for additional flexibility in the Middle East, which can be provided by flexible thermal plants, by energy storage, or even by demand side management to some extent. And I had some discussions with local players, and I was surprised that when it came to mid-merit or peaking operation, their first idea or first choice was open cycle gas turbines. And when we started to talk about gas engines and generators, they were thinking about a small kilowatt scale industrial application. Well, the reality is that flexible engine-based power plants come in much higher higher units, bigger units, 10 to 20 megawatt units, and a selected number of gensets can be deployed next to each other. They provide higher efficiency than open cycle gas turbines, even in high temperature conditions. And what really distinguishes them from the rest is that fast ramping capability. These gensets can be up at full load in 2 minutes. And having 10 of these assets next to each other can allow the operator to inject 200 megawatt of power into the grid in 2 minutes, or also the other way, drop the load, for example, if sun suddenly comes up. Unfortunately, in this webinar, we don't have the time to go more into the details of engine technology, but this webinar will be followed by a webcast series focusing on Middle East energy issues, and we will dedicate one episode specifically for this. So now I would like to invite all of you to join that, and also would like to pass the microphone to my colleague Giriraj to talk about solutions when even faster flexibility is needed, and tell us the secret that what's the magic glue that holds these complex energy systems together and enables the seamless operation of these assets. So Giriraj, floor is yours.
Thank you.
So Giriraj, whilst you prepare your screen, perhaps I could remind people that as soon as Giriraj finishes, we're going to take the questions. So please send them through. They're being answered already by texts. So if you send them now, you will get a text answer right away. And also, Giriraj, are you okay with your screen? Do you have any issues?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if. Give me a moment, please. Yeah.
Because otherwise, perhaps I can ask a question.
No, it should be okay. Give me a moment.
Sure.
Please let me know if you see my screen.
It's sharing. Yes, we can see your screen. Perfect.
And you can see the slideshow,
it says
right?
agreed large-scale energy storage, and it has like it's like a quote. Yeah.
Perfect. So good afternoon. Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. I will briefly be talking about energy storage and why it is such a talked about concept in a modern grid. And then I'll quickly touch upon the need for optimization using energy storage. So on this slide, I've talked about the concept of grid scale energy storage. And I think it's important to understand that electricity grids that were designed decades ago were very different from the smart grids we see in the region today. Back then, electricity had to be produced the instant it was needed and consumed just as fast because there was no economical way to store it, right? But today we have many ways to store excess energy, like flywheels, pumped hydro, thermal, and batteries. All these storage devices serve different applications. But for the purpose of this discussion, I think we'll talk only about grid scale battery energy storage systems, or BESS as we call it. Storage is a very important tool to have on the grid. If we had to sum up the role of a grid scale BESS, the flexibility and reliability it adds to the grid would be right at top of the list. The option to have storage on the grid is important for many reasons. The first part is that BESS allows matching grid supply to demand, not on an hourly or minute basis, but right down to seconds, and much more efficiently than any other source, right? Flexibility, one of the reasons utilities can now integrate gigawatt level VRE is because BESS can compensate for the intermittence from PV and wind. And we can see that there is a lot of intermittence which comes in as we keep on adding PV. Having BESS reduces the need for frequent start and stop of the existing thermal fleet, which helps in better use of the generation as well as the T&D infrastructure, right? Prices, I'm not going to go into the details on how low and when we, maybe we can talk about that in the Q&A, but the falling cost of storage is now the new reality, and the use of affordable storage in combination with renewables is honestly the real game changer of our times, right? If you look at the LCOEs of the more recent projects for grid scale opportunities, we can safely say that PV plus BESS has already reached grid parity with gas-based power plants, at least in some regions, right? Also, from an OpEx perspective, batteries have substantially low standby costs compared to the rotating equipment. So overall, CapEx, OpEx, I think the use of BESS makes absolute economic sense in that sense, right? Ancillary services, I think this is something that not many people talk about, but this is something which is becoming more and more talked about in you know, as renewables are getting added onto the grid, and the thermal fleet is acting a little differently. So the name storage can be a little misleading, because storing energy for shifting is not all that a typical BESS does, right? The same battery that can do energy arbitrage can also meet ancillary services needed for the grid. So on this chart, you can see what really sets the battery apart is the ability to serve multiple needs for multiple consumers. So in the Middle East, especially, BESS adds value mostly in VRE plus BESS projects rather than as a standalone unit. And the way BESS is sized depends on what specific needs it is required to cater to. So the chart that you see here is meant to show the typical sizing of BESS for various applications. Leading utilities have conducted studies, and they've found that using BESS to provide a range of ancillary services like frequency response, in the case of PV, it's PV ramping, PV smoothing, etc. It really allows them to free up the existing thermal assets, and it's much more economical on a revenue per service basis. So these are all services, and they have a certain revenue, and in that sense, the revenue per service basis, there's a huge economical impact on that. What this basically means is that if you had a utility or an IPP, under the current operational philosophy, it would be required to reserve a certain percentage, say about 10 to 15% of a turbine's nominal capacity, to meet the primary frequency response, right? Now, if secondary frequency response is also required, it would again be taken off the same thermal asset, meaning that a typical thermal asset would never be able to operate at its potential. And then you can add onto this the intermittence from new VRE deployment. And in the case of Abu Dhabi, you can also talk about nuclear. And you can see that existing thermal assets will be required to run in a manner that they were not designed for. So for a grid operator, and I think this is one of the questions that was asked in the Q&A, for a grid operator, the speed of response will be a key factor to manage this intermittence. And honestly, nobody or no other asset can do this better than batteries. So now that it's clear that more renewables on the grid bring down the cost of generation, and also significantly reducing the carbon emissions. But on the what's on the flip side? If you look at the flip side, it does add tremendous intermittence to the grid, right? So this is something we've already established. So a solar plant could cater to, let's say, a gigawatt of demand at peak hours of the day. But it also means that in case of a cloud cover, the sudden drop in generation, which can run into a couple of 100 megawatts, must be met by other assets. So this sudden ramping is not easy. And the ability of the power system to respond instantly to signals from the grid operator become a very key factor here. So this sort of flexibility requires a very efficient energy management system. And that brings me to the most critical element in WÄRTSILÄ's value chain, GEMS, as we call it, the energy management software that is really the backbone of our energy transition. Right? So GEMS not only works as an EMS for integrating energy storage with the other grid assets, but it also serves as an integrated software platform itself for operating power plants and the grids intelligently. So you have the grids operating in a certain manner. By introduction of GEMS, you can make them function in a very, very intelligent manner. So if you look at energy optimization, what does it really mean for a country, right? At the country level, energy optimization is all about being able to benefit from the diverse portfolio of assets that a country has by ensuring that the least expensive asset is always available for dispatch. And that's really at the heart of what GEMS really does. So we don't really have the time to go into the architecture details, but let me just give you a brief aerial view of how GEMS works. So if you look at this diagram, you could see that we have multiple generating assets at the grid level, controlled by a local power plant controller. It could be GEMS or a power plant controller from one of the existing assets. And this is monitored by an on-site operator for alarms and signals. This platform is then connected to the cloud through a fleet director managing multiple power plant controllers. And this data that is available there, this can be analyzed by data analysts, and they can remotely make optimizations at an asset level, and thereby maximizing the renewable penetration. So let me show you the same concept with an example. So we have success stories around the world, and the one that we are particularly proud of is this island called Graciosa. It's in the northern Atlantic. And here on Graciosa, a combination of BESS and GEMS helps in integrating renewables while simultaneously optimizing the multiple generating assets on sites. And we have multiple assets ranging from solar PV, wind, and engines. Now, as of today, this island is capable of running on 100% renewables for several days without the need of for switching the engines on at all. And if the engines need to be switched on at all, the GEMS will help with the transition from renewables to engines and vice versa. We have been operating this plant for the last 2 years now, and by using load and renewable forecasting as well as dispatch optimization, our team there has been able to increase the renewable penetration way beyond the initial 65% target that was set and that was assigned to us. So, and really, that is a perfect example which involves essentially all the benefits that can be achieved in a hybrid renewable power plant, like maximizing renewables, minimizing fuel costs, and improving overall grid reliability. So the previous example was more about the complexity of operations rather than the size of the assets involved, because it was a much smaller site. But the same philosophy can easily be scaled up for bigger installations also. These are a few of our references. You can see they're all over the world. Primarily, the initial installations were in the US because that's where we started from. But I think now we're going all over the world. And WÄRTSILÄ, in the energy storage field, it has been it has been around for the last 15 years, and we are currently rated as the 4th largest energy storage company in terms of deployed capacity. We have installed over 70 facilities globally, and building on the success we've had in the US, we are now growing our storage business worldwide with more recent successes in Europe and Asia. We've signed, I think, about 5 deals in the last 5 years, in the last year. And the last one, the latest one being the 100 megawatt hour BSS with Pivot Power in UK. So this is it. I think this talks about battery, this talks about our software, and it talks about the overall integration. And I really hope this makes you think a little differently when you think of WÄRTSILÄ as only an engine power plant manufacturer, because we do storage and optimization as well, and we do it very, very well. So that's it from me. I hope you found this useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Giriraj. May I ask you, please, to stop sharing your screen so that we can see you all in a large screen? Sure. And I have a few questions. I know that you guys have been furiously answering some of the questions there, but I have some for you from what I've gathered from the audience as well. And we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to direct each question to you in turn. And then, if you want to add anything from the other side, please feel free. So one of the questions.
Am I still sharing my screen, by the way? Sorry. I can't
no,
see it.
you're fine now. No,
okay,
it's all good.
Perfect,
it's
perfect,
all good.
Perfect.
All right. So, Alex, there was a question about the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on the energy plans of the Middle East. And I'd like, please, if you could answer that live as well.
Yeah. So I think we have not seen or we have not foreseen any drastic changes. And I think if we look at the regions as we speak now, if I talk about behavior of Wärtsilä, I mean, I think we have actually been as active as ever. So I think that didn't have any effect. But if we look at the transitions that we're foreseeing, I think we may see some slow delay, but I don't think we see any change of mind. The market in the Middle East is moving towards renewable and therefore moving towards energy storage and therefore looking at more flexibility in order to get the cheapest, most affordable energy sector. So no big change, I don't foresee.
Thank you very much. And Matti, you talked about energy trends, but you didn't mention hydrogen or, for example, concentrated solar power or other technologies of the like. Do you think any of this may also be important in the future?
Well, absolutely. Hydrogen is the hot topic now. That if you asked this question 2 years ago, I think that we were the only one who were talking about the hydrogen and the importance of the synthetic fuels, and it's actually a next step, a consequence of this energy transition when we start to have cheap renewable electricity, excess electricity available. So electricity becomes a raw material for something else, and that enables hydrogen economy. Then is it then synthetic fuels or hydrogen as a blend or however that is used? But here, for example, that's our vision is 100% renewable future. We are already doing today synthetic fuel projects. We just announced one a couple of weeks ago in Finland, where we are building together with the local utility synthetic methane production. So this is reality already today, and it will come an industry standard in the future for sure.
You know, I found very interesting that where you show, you know, that actually Germany ended up paying people to take their green energy, which I thought it was great. And yeah, you're right. You know, that there is an inflexible system, which unless it adapts and it changes, then, you know, you end up with problems. So what is the theoretical maximum today of penetration of renewables in a power system?
Well, for example, the German case, they paid for somebody to take their electricity because of the inflexibility. So I think that the highest what we have seen momentarily now in Germany during this COVID-19 situation is around 84% renewables, and the prices go negative. But at the same time, they are exporting 14 gigawatts of electricity while they have their nuclear plants and the coal plants still running. So theoretically, there is nothing to prevent Germany to be 100% renewable. They could have been 100% renewable and already right now, but it's just the inflexibility of the existing system that is preventing them to do so. But more we see this kind of development, more these kind of negative prices start to hit there, the more economic reason there is to get rid of the baseload generation. So it's just a matter of time. But theoretically, 100%.
100%. That's great. We'd like to see it as soon as possible. I think by 2050, most of Europe is going to be there. The question is, you know, just how long? Because I suppose as you approach more than 100%, it gets harder and harder, not easier, more expensive.
Yeah, but on the other hand, we have now proven that we can be on the European level. We can be easily 60% renewables. We can go to 80%. We have in WÄRTSILÄ modified our customer systems to 85% renewable today. So and now these examples that I mentioned, that what we are doing in Finland is exactly that they're going to decarbonize by 2022 to 100%. But you need this technology, you need this solution. So I say that be ready, people, that this will come faster than you think. Everybody knew that it will take decades before renewable energy is affordable, but here we are.
Here we are, indeed. Giriraj, can the European or the US energy storage business model be implemented in the Middle East as well?
Interesting question. See, the UK and US markets are deregulated markets, right? They're not the kind of markets that we have here. So the same markets can be used for the same batteries can be used for multiple applications and increase their revenue stream, right? So there you have the concept of an entity owning the batteries, and you know, there is a tariff structure. They can trade in the capacity merchant market, and they can gain revenue, right? In the Middle East, the existing thermal power plants have to provide the ancillary services. So there is no revenue making mechanism as such. So with the new tenders, I think the tariff structure for PV plus BSS defines the monetary value that can be gained from a PV plus BSS combination. And the prices are quite lucrative as well. I mean, you're already seeing price levels of, I think, about if solar is maybe 1.35 cents, you're looking at something like maybe about 3 or 4 or 5 cents coming from PV plus BSS. So in that sense, yes, I think the market is beginning to catch up. But going back to your initial question, I think there is a fundamental difference in the way the markets are structured. And unless there is a revenue stream for battery as a standalone unit, I think it will be a while before we can call both the markets similar.
Thank you very much. Okay, let me follow up with a question. What conditions need to apply in order to make energy storage feasible? And what is the main purpose of battery energy storage really within this?
Of course, the cost of batteries, of course, and that is going to happen anyway. You and I, we don't need to do anything special there. But other than that, I think there also needs to be a regulatory framework in place which promotes the use of BSS for grid scale applications, for CNI applications. So this is something that needs to happen. The other thing is the multifaceted role of BSS, both for arbitrage as well as ancillary services. It'll have to be defined more clearly if the tariff structure takes that into account in the new specifications. Other than that, I would also like to see a case for standalone battery storage, something which I talked about earlier, where system operators can benefit from trading in merchant markets. Right now, that is not the case, and that's the reason why you don't see the batteries being deployed in the same manner that's happening in other parts of the world. Here, batteries are all about the combination of PV or wind, but standalone batteries, I think we still don't have a real good case for that.
Okay, thank you very much. Question for Patrick. Also been, someone asked also in the Q&A. Most utilities in the GCCs have a large combined cycle gas fleets, and they've served them well. They're still, they're fully working, and it kind of. Are you saying that this should be completely replaced and they should, rethink the system as of now, or should they use them for the years they have? Sorry, we cannot hear you, Patrick. Sorry.
Yep, now
now you can hear you. Yes.
So I did not mean to imply that all of the CCGT fleet should be replaced. What I'm saying that with the introduction of more and more renewables, in order to CCGTs operate inexpensively, cheaply, there need to be an enabler that enables that. And what we see also in the Bloomberg report that actually baseload gas generation will play a role in the future, although their running hours are expected to also decrease and see and explore new thresholds. So I personally, I don't believe in extreme situations, rather well-balanced portfolios which really suit local conditions and also the global tendencies. And I think that the real art is finding that, striking that balance is and orchestrating that system.
Thank you very much, Patrick. We don't have a lot of time. We've gone over a little bit. So I have just 2 more questions, please. And then I'm really sorry about the questions we haven't answered from the Q&A, but we'll send them across to the team at WÄRTSILÄ and hopefully they'll get back to you. Right. To Alex or Patrick, I don't know, whomever wants to take it, maybe both of you, just be short because of the time. What is the fuel of your flexible power solution? Isn't it fossil fuel as well?
So from our side, yes. Actually, that was the beauty of the era that we have created, is that we are able to burn crude oil, heavy fuel, light fuel, up to natural gas, and like Matti said, even synthetic gas. So we have that flexibilities depending of the market. So IPP3, for example, in Jordan, has that capability to switch on and off depending of the market demand, depending of the situation. And if you look at the lockdown that we had, HFO has become actually cheaper than gas. And you can see a lot of market, like in Pakistan, that started to see the merit of order of the old power plant in HFO being actually on the higher level compared to a gas plant. So this is the beauty of having what we call a dual fuel engines, is be able to be flexible on whatever is required when the market is in stress like it is today.
And last question, but certainly not least, Matti. Okay, so the UAE is building a 5.6 gigawatt nuclear power plant. So the question is really, how well does it contribute to the energy transition?
Well, yeah, this is a thing that I as an old nuclear engineer want to highlight that that please reconsider. And I know that it's from the environment perspective, from the emission perspective, it's a good thing, and it's a clean. But from the future system flexibility challenges point there, it will increase the challenges with integration with the renewables. That's we have the evidence from the Europe, same happening in the United States where they're closing nuclear power plants. So it's all about coming back to the economics. So it's I know it's a hot topic, but if you look purely that from the economic and the energy transition perspective, it is a difficult call to build new nuclear power plants.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, some of the other plants that the UAE are also building is a huge CSP project for nighttime solar, 700 megawatts as well. So there's certainly a little bit of thinking, you know, in the way of building some different, I suppose, technologies that come in at different times. But I agree, you know, that like us as of a system level, we need to be thinking more about creating capacity. So thank you very much, Alex. Thank you very much, Matti. Thank you very much, Giriraj and Patrick. We've gone a little bit over time. So if you'd like to add something really quickly, otherwise.
No, I think thank you very much for having us. It was, you know, perfect session. And I, you know, just like to close on a little bit on what Matti said, you know, during that lockdown, it's unbelievable how much we have seen, and anything that was inflexible was shut down. And I think that's what the market needs to understand is all of this will take, we don't have to fix it. It will happen by himself because it just becomes inflexible to the requirement that we're trying to reach.
Yeah, indeed. We need to be thinking about things completely differently. Up until now, it was just a matter of when do we need energy and creating it. Now we need to think of energy and resource, and those are the two axes that we're moving in. So thank you very much for your time. Again, Alex, Matti, Giriraj, and Patrick. And thank you very much, everyone who's been there all along. We will send you a link with the recordings and the materials, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.